Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our new study in the first letter to the Corinthians by Paul. We're going to take a look at our recall triad for chapter 1, verses 18 through 31, the wisdom of God overlapping with the concept of the people of God. Take a look at block 1. We'll look at verses 18 through 20, the logos staurao. The idea of the cross was an absurd idea for the people of Paul's day, but this lack of knowing had been prophesied in Isaiah 29:14, where the rational constructions of secular knowing would end up becoming empty. The wisdom of the world, says Paul, cannot grasp the concept of God. And then in 1:26 through 27, the great paradox is that God, through Christ, has chosen the foolish and the weak as his elect in order to dishonor and to nullify those who boast in themselves. Now in block 2, we'll take a look at the concept of charisma, verses 21 to 23. Paul states that world knowing cannot grasp the concept of God. Paul says that knowledge of God is mediated through the act of proclamation, charisma, which appears as foolishness to secular reason. Secular reason perceives it as foolishness. Then Paul concludes the mediation of charisma invites the response of pisteuo faith, which creates the dialogue of call. And out of the dialogue of call evolves the act of knowing. And then in 1:28 and 29, those who are the elect will be the least esteemed individuals, but they will be the ones who nullify those who boast in themselves out of pride. So from proclaiming the cross and the act of proclamation, the charisma, we go on to the power of knowing in block 3. The idea of the cross and the mediation of charisma create the divine power of knowing. Additionally, this can only occur for those who are called in the call of Christ and respond with a pisteuo faith, a faith-based invoking of Christ in worship and in praise. Then real knowing can be acquired. Paul says God's wisdom is wiser and more real concerning the aletheia spiritual truth. And then in 1:30 and 31, the elect have received the grace of spiritual perception and knowing that all redemption, all righteousness are en Christo. We know that all redemption, all righteousness is en Christo, all redemption, all sanctification is in Christ. So we got a great lesson closing out chapter 1 here, but we do want to take a look at our 4-point focus also. We do have our proclamation of the cross, the act of proclamation, the charisma, and the power of knowing as a gift of grace. That triad takes us next to the 4-point focus. Give our snapshot here of the lesson. For Paul, the wisdom of God was a concept that overlapped with the people of God, and it emerged in 3 moments. First, the idea of the cross was a scandal to all who were not called. However, the elect could perceive Christ and respond in belief. And that would actually dishonor all those who boast in their own status. 2, charisma, the act of proclamation becomes a saving event for God's elect because they can hear and they can perceive, and they will then nullify all those who boast in their own status. And then 3, en Christo, the elect are grasped by the Spirit's power of knowing, and through this force they know that redemption is only acquired in Christ. So you got the idea of the cross, the act of proclamation, and the reality of being in Christ as the only road to redemption, the only road to sanctification, the only way to salvation. So we got a great recall triad here And it all is centered on really block one. You can really go all the way back to block one. Logos staurao. Paul says so many times in all of his letters, we preach Christ crucified. We preach Christ crucified. Paul overcame that stumbling block of a Messiah who could be crucified, and when the grace of God allowed him to overcome that, then he could read Isaiah and understand Isaiah prophetically concerning the Messiah, Jesus Christ. He always said, we preach Christ crucified. And then the act of proclamation, that is power. The kerygma is power. But kerygma is the act and the message combined. Kerygma is the act of proclaiming the gospel and the message of the gospel combined. That's called kerygma. The kerygma is the power unto salvation. What does that result in? Spiritual knowing, the power of knowing. In block 3, that power of knowing. Iskiros gnosko, the power of knowing. The idea of the cross, the mediation of kerygma proclamation, creates the power of knowing as an event. That leads us to the powerful realization that we are justified and sanctified only in Christ. We are saved because he took on the kenosis, self-emptying of his equality with the Father, and became a servant even unto the curse of the cross for our salvation, because of his faithful obedience, because of the pisteuos Christou, because of the pisteuos Christou, we are saved. Because of the pisteuos Christou, we are saved, redeemed, and sanctified. So, a great wrap-up of chapter 1, Paul starts right out with powerful theological teaching. The wisdom of God is a concept that overlaps with the people of God in the mind of Paul, the Damascus Road converted Pharisee. The wisdom of God overlaps with the people of God. Those two concepts overlap. And where do they overlap? Right at the cross of Christ. They overlap on Golgotha. That'll wrap up this recall triad. We're going to be picking up in chapter 2 next.